Our second reading is from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 14, verses 1 to 11, and can be found on page 1047 of the Bible. Hear the Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ, according to Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. There in front of him was a man suffering from abnormal swelling of his body. Jesus asked the Pharisees and experts in the law, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remained silent. So, taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him on his way. Then he asked them, "If one of you has a child or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath day, will you not immediately pull it out?" And they had nothing to say. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, "Give this person your seat." Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, "Friend, move up to a better place." Then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ. Ever find yourself looking down on others? It's very easy to do, isn't it? To look down on others, particularly when you are 6 feet above correction. It's easy to do because we get puffed up with self-importance, don't we? I'm really quite important, you know. I think I deserve what I've been given. After all, I really am much better than, well, you. I've had an education, you know. Doesn't show. These sorts of things that we get puffed up with our own self-importance. And you might be thinking, but I'm not that sort of person. But actually, it can be much more subtle, isn't it? I'll have the bigger piece of cake. I'd quite like to be first in the queue. And don't even get me started about other drivers. Have you noticed all other drivers on the road are complete idiots? Have you noticed that? If only they drove as well as me, because I'm a superb driver. Well, we like to feel important. I'm just going to tie that balloon off. We like to feel important, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my time up here. I'm going to come down here. Because Jesus speaks of this in Luke chapter 14, that passage Denise read to us. Do you see at verse 1 Sabbath? Do turn with me, page 1047. Check the preacher's not making it up. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. You notice that? He was being watched. Have you ever been somewhere where you think people are looking at me? Well, he was being watched, but he wasn't the only one doing some watching. Look down at verse 7. Jesus is watching. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable and then gives a lesson in humility. Now, to help us understand this a little bit, I've got a table here, and this isn't exactly what it would have been, you understand. But basically, you would have had these sort of recliners because people would have been reclining at the meal with their arms down on their elbow and their feet outstretched, and there would have been this sort of U shape of these recliners, which meant that the person at the end will have to make do with a go-pack table and some plastic chairs. But basically, that would be the best place at the end there, and then you'd have other seats around the place. And to help us with that, I've got some little labels here. So we've got the VIP slot at the end. We've got important guest here, and then we've got regular seat over here. Maybe let's put the important guest a bit nearer the VIP. So picture, he talks there about a wedding banquet. You know, when you go to a wedding, you've got the top table. So this is where the place of honour would be. And I thought it'd be helpful just to play this out using these verses 8 to 10. Let's see what Jesus said. So it says, so if the host who invited both of you, oh no, hang on, we'll go back a bit. Verse 8, I just can't see. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, right, who can I invite to a wedding feast? Matty, let me invite you to a wedding feast. This is Matthew, number 4 son, always very willing. Come on, Dad, help me. Now, I'd like to invite you to a seat. You can sit wherever you like. Where would you think you'd like to sit?
I'll sit over here.
You'll sit where? Oh, sit in the VIP. Oh, I see. Well, you obviously take after your one of your parents. I can't believe it. Right, okay. So it says, when someone invites you to a wedding feast, don't take the place of honour, because when a person more distinguished than you, right, I'm looking for a more distinguished person. Who could that be? Olivia, do you want to come and help me? Here, we've got a very distinguished person that's been invited. I think you're more distinguished. You're in the wrong seat. Go on, you get out of the way. You go and sit down there in the regular seat. Olivia, come and sit here. You are the VIP, which stands for very important person. There we are. What does Jesus say? He says, a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited you will come and say to you, give this person your seat. Then humiliated, you will take the least important seat. But when you're invited, take the lowest place. So we need to invite someone else. Who else would like to come to the party? Come on, Keith, come to the party. Would you like to go? We're looking for a distinguished guest, but we can't find any. So come on, Keith, you come. Now, I would have put you down here in this regular seat, but well, you have to come to a more important seat up here and talk to our VIP. Here we are.
Hello, VIP.
There we are, VIP. Excellent. There we are. And he says, when you're invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes and says, friend, move up to a better place, then you'll be honoured in the presence of all the other guests. So all the other guests, they welcomed and honoured him. Give him a clap. There we are.
Well done, Matthew.
Well done. Thank you. Thank you. You can sit down now. Thank you very much. And thank you, Matthew, for being my very kind stooge for me. So what's the punchline of what Jesus is saying? Can you look down at verse 11? We'll say it together. Shall we, if we can see that? I might need my glasses on. Let's say it together, shall we? Luke 14, verse 11. Together, everybody said, for all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. So humility, we're talking about here. Humility. Willing to put others first, serving rather than showing off. And in St. Paul's letter to the Colossians chapter 3, verse 12, he says, clothe yourselves with love and kindness and other things, including humility. So put things on. It's very good to see that everyone has clothed themselves today. Literally put your clothes on. So what sort of things would it look like to clothe ourselves with humility this week? Sometimes we say to children, just share with others. That's a good thing, not just for children. We don't always need to win. We don't always need to have the last word. We don't need to prove our worth by how popular we are. I was going to say that's perhaps one for teenagers or younger people, but that could be for all of us. For itself, we could choose service over status. There's all sorts of practical ways this could play out. And they're all good things. And I know you'll be able to think of some more things of how we can humble ourselves, be humble this week. The thing is, Jesus didn't come to give advice about social occasions. If we do this, it would go well, wouldn't it? Particularly in that ancient Middle Eastern culture, it would go well. It would be the right social thing to do. But that's not why Jesus came, and that's not why he told what told this story. Because look at the last word of verse 7. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. He told them a parable. And as you may remember, if you've been around the last few weeks, we looked at the parable of the lost son, really the two lost sons. And parable, we said as a definition, is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. So we've looked at the sort of earthly outworking of this and some of the things that humility might look like. But what does this tell us about God? Because that's why Jesus was telling it. It wasn't just a nice bit of advice. Well, in this parable, we saw these people jostling for position at the table, didn't we? Someone comes and thinks, "Oh, I'll have the best seat in the house." And so in Jesus' day, people were also, as it were, jostling for position before God. Eager to keep God's law, a good thing. Eager to be pure before God, again, a good thing. Sometimes eager to show how right they were before other people. Good to be right, but think about our motives. It would be people like the Pharisees in the first 6 verses who were watching Jesus closely. You see, it was all too easy for the well-off, the well-educated, and the well-to-do to imagine they were superior in God's sight, deserved this VIP seat, because they'd done all these things right. And not only that, they were better than these poor, uneducated, social outcasts, these sinners. And that's come up a number of times over recent months, hasn't it? If you're a regular here, we've seen that, of Jesus interacting with so-called sinners. The summary of these people would be, in fact, as it says in one of the headings in this book, they were clever, but not kind. Clever, but not kind. And in Luke 14, Jesus rather, he, would you mind? He pops their bubble, this bubble of self-importance. He pops their bubble and says, he says, well, look, this is what's going on. This is where your heart is. Because as we look at this, as we expand out, meals are not just a social occasion, and not just an occasion where we see, quote, Jesus in action. That's what meals with Jesus, as he interacts with other people. But it's also a picture of God's welcome and celebration. If you've got your Bibles open, just flick over one page to Luke chapter 15. And as I mentioned, we looked a few weeks ago, week by week, we looked at the parable of the lost son, as it's called in here. So a son goes off, spends the family money, and then comes back to his dad and is reconciled to his dad. If you look down at verse, 23 and 24, so near the bottom of the page, bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again, was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meals are a picture of celebration, of God's welcome. And in Luke 14, if you flip back to there, did you notice that in Jesus' parable, there was a host, a person who invited them. The host, this is a picture of God inviting and directing. You sit here, exalting and humbling. But people then and people now want to block that out because of the opposite of humility, which is pride. Pride is the opposite of humility. And to change the metaphor, as we look out here now, I've actually arranged for the sun to be out. Have you noticed that? I'm very pleased with that. The sun is brilliant because the sun is always shining in the daytime, but it can be covered by the cloud, can't it? Covered by cloud. And what we see the picture as we see this, the picture of the whole scriptures is God being like the sun, God's generosity, God's open-heartedness to people being like the sun. But the clouds is our pride, the pride that says, I deserve God's favour. I deserve this seat because of all these things I've done. And not only that, I deserve it, but he doesn't, and she doesn't. And we look down on other people. Jesus, as it were, breaks through that cloud of pride and brings this sort of warmth and sunshine. You know, when you're there and outside and it's all a bit chill. It's been a bit cold of late, isn't it? But when the sun comes out, it's lovely and warm. It's like the clouds are parted and we can see the sun. And Jesus breaks through. And that's why that reading that Denise read to us from Philippians 2 is so wonderful. Because we see Jesus, who deserved the best seat at the best table, in Philippians chapter 2, verse 6, who being in very nature God, didn't consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage, but rather made himself nothing. He didn't just go to the important guest seat or to the regular seat, or here. He went right down and down and down. He took the very nature of a servant, made in human likeness, humbled himself to death on a cross. That's what Jesus, who should be sitting here, who should be sitting right back here, if we were to extend the analogy, on the biggest seat, on the biggest stage, at the best event. Jesus is there giving himself for us. So what is our response to this? Well, in the letter of James, there's a verse that says very simply this, James 4, verse 10, humble yourself before God, and he will lift you up. Humble yourself before God. Humble yourself before God. So that's acknowledging the true state of our hearts. We didn't say, perhaps we should have said, that prayer that many of us know from that great Anglican prayer, the Lord God who knows all the secrets of our hearts. We can't pull the wool over God's eyes, but we need to acknowledge the true state of our heart and to accept his forgiveness. Because when you're in there, then you're secure in God's love. Once you're secure in God's love, you can then be content with second place or third place or no place. Because we follow somebody who just gave up this place and that, but was way down there. So why would we want to say, excuse me, I'd like to sit here, please. And not only would I like to sit here, but you don't deserve to sit here. That pride racing up within us. Someone said that the ground is level at the foot of the cross. There's no place for pride. Pride is the thing that will keep us from that. Pride is the thing that will keep us from loving and serving others. And it's so freeing to find our security in God and to say, I don't mind what I do. I don't have to prove myself to anybody. It's so freeing. And also it's so good for community because you don't get snooty people standing there looking down on others. I was talking to someone yesterday and I said, oh, did you go to church? I said, I've been to church before, but I basically got chucked out of a church or was pushed away because I wasn't doing the right things, or they disapproved of something I was saying or doing. Now, it's right that we want to have godly lifestyles, but it's basically, you're not like us, you're not good enough. On you go. I'm not quite sure what Bible they're reading. But here we have Jesus, the biggest of the VIP, giving his life for us, that we might know his freedom and forgiveness, but we need to say sorry to bring our pride to him. And just as a footnote to this, as I finish, I've talked a lot about pride and some outward things, and you might be saying, I genuinely want to serve. And I know there are loads of people who do that, and that's brilliant. I would say to all of us about what's our motives in that, and just to check that, not saying there's necessarily something wrong, but to check those motives. But also to remember this wonderful quote from a writer called Tim Keller, who we looked at that book earlier in the year, The Prodigal God. And he really helpfully says this: the Christian gospel, the message of Jesus, is that I am so flawed that Jesus had to die for me. Yet I'm so loved and valued that Jesus was glad to die for me. This leads to a deep humility and a deep confidence at the same time. It undermines both swaggering and snivelling. I cannot feel superior to anyone, and yet I have nothing to prove to anyone. I do not think more of myself, nor less of myself. Instead, I think of myself less. That is the message of the Bible. That is good news, and that's what we're called to live.